Accipiter's doing some amazing things. Big things is obviously to be able to integrate the information from different sources, how you integrate it, how you present it. And I know Tim's going to go through some of that. So Tim, if you're good, I will let you take it from here.
Thank you, Andy, and I appreciate the invite. Can you see my screen okay and hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear, and screen's good on my end.
Terrific. Well, thanks for having me. I've been following drones as first responders for some time, and we're very active in the surveillance area. And Jorgen, I appreciate the definition on beyond visual line of sight, because I've always been scared watching law enforcement and firefighters, emergency response use drones with their heads down. So I think you've characterized it well. And one of the things I'd like to talk about today is how we bring that airspace domain awareness to DFR use, and how we scale it for wide scale use. I'll touch briefly on who we are as a company, and really the focus of this briefing is to look at drones as first responders from an airspace awareness perspective by focusing on a number of sort of standard scenarios. And some of those scenarios, in our view, require or would benefit from the awareness of other drones in the vicinity where you're operating, not just the DFR, but other drones. And counter UAS technologies enables that. And then a sort of second class or group of scenarios is where you want to fly true beyond visual line of sight. So from a command center, fly the drone off a rooftop to location. And for that, you need to know where the general aviation and commercial aircraft are, so that you can avoid them, just like any other aircraft. Instead of visual flight rules for manned aircraft, we need detect and alert technologies, capabilities to provide that surveillance. I would comment before I get into this that in North America, and I'm actually sitting in Canada on the sort of Canadian-US border, there are many areas that don't require ADS-B or Mode C. So you need radar as well if you want to see all the aircraft that you might come into contact with. By looking at these scenarios, I think they'll point to establishing the need for an integrated surveillance approach to airspace awareness. Also maritime domain awareness in littoral regions, especially for search and rescue type scenarios. And hopefully I'll motivate and show how this leads to affordability and force multiplication, which in our countries, I think, where the land mass is so large, are fundamental to scaling DFR use in our communities. And then I'll finish very lightly on the technology side of it. So first, a little bit about us. We're a surveillance company that really develops advanced applications, all domain awareness, so on the water, in the air, on the ground. This talk is focused around beyond visual line of sight, detect and alert use, and counter UAS, which we've also developed with stakeholders and deployed globally. And so I'd like to shift and just develop a couple of standard DFR scenarios, ones that this community are well familiar with, and use this first group of scenarios to motivate why you might also be interested in knowing where the other drones are in your vicinity. So for an incident overwatch, where you can provide critical awareness of situational awareness of shootings, burglaries, lockdowns, schools and public buildings, it's more and more common to find other drones in the vicinity, whether it be via the public or news agencies, or even criminals that could negatively interfere with operations. And so the counter UAS piece is useful to the DFR piece. For crime and scene documentation scenarios where you're looking for high quality evidence and documentation of an accident, say, again, being aware of those sites that you've secured off and are investigating, being aware that others may be providing oversight with their drones and possibly leaking information that could compromise your efforts. And then certainly on the firefighting side, where we're getting situational awareness of fires for better outcomes. Same problem with especially public and the public and news agencies. We've seen examples of these scenarios. I've just snipped a few examples of each of these. And from a technology standpoint, which I'm going to speak to in each sort of scenario group case, in this case here, we're looking for the awareness of other drones in the vicinity. And this particular illustration is actually at our facility. And one of the areas that's always caught my attention is police response to burglar alarms. And wouldn't it be nice in today's climate to be able to quickly determine if there were any drones loitering in the vicinity of a burglar alarm to give you a better sense of what you might be facing. So I'm going to give you another set of examples, search and rescue that we're all familiar with, and overwatch of large public events. On the search and rescue side, we live in a large Great Lakes region where there's large land masses surrounded also by very, very large waterways. And so the search and rescue here has a littoral, has a maritime component with it as well. It's missing persons on land, certainly, but also triaging. In the summer, maritime incidents on the water. In the winter, it freezes at our latitude. So even ice fishing scenarios that are called in and reported. I think as drone use in the public grows, and it's growing, even though it may not be, awareness of other drones may not be a priority today, I think it will become a priority in the future. Certainly it would be in terms of overwatch of large public events where criminal drones could be weaponized. We've seen examples of both types, search and rescue and public events, and certainly articles are readily around where drones have disrupted major sporting events. We also, in the summertime, this is sort of local to home, we have CERRA incidents that occur quite often close to land, and that require police and joint rescue coordination centers to confirm reports, many of which can be triaged as just false reports, just concerned residents, observers doing their job, but requiring a police response to confirm. I want to focus next on a couple of areas where drone awareness of other drones in the vicinity is needed, but these might be areas, scenarios, if you will, that at first blush might not be a drone of first responder use. So one is certainly threat to aviation. Examples include air ambulances, orange here in our area, news and tourist choppers. We're very close to Niagara Falls, and there's choppers running all the time, and drones near airports. And the issue is awareness of accidents, or pre-awareness of potential accidents. The aviation safety piece, where clueless, careless, and sometimes criminal drones are flying. And you might be surprised if you're not in the surveillance space, what this actually looks like. So I'm going to share some real data with you. This is 3 months of data in the vicinity of an aerodrome. And drones, these long purple lines represent the routes this particular chopper took over the course of 3 months. And these vertical lines that you see, these are detections, counter UAS detections of drone activity, just the public, if you will, flying drones, recreationally or otherwise. And Jürgen talked about the altitude limit for what he calls a beyond visual line of sight trained pilot. We have a similar limit, the 400-foot limit. These orange vertical lines, these orange ones represent violation of that 400-foot limit. So these are drones, plenty of them, that break that limit, either clueless or careless or otherwise. But if you're the chopper, if you're the pilot of that chopper, and you're flying, your routes daily, weekly, this is what you're flying through. You're flying through a landmine of drones in the vicinity, and it's just a matter of time before this chopper is at the same place as this drone at the same time. And so anyway, there's drones violate altitude rules regularly and risk harm in our communities. And that's another we see as a DFR scenario where having awareness of the other drones is helpful. Shouldn't law enforcement reach out to repeat offenders? So if you have these even clueless or careless, and with counter UAS, we can determine in the course of 1 week automatically that these pilots in these locations were flying their drones above the 400-foot ceiling regularly. In this example, June 6th, June 8th, June 9th. Shouldn't law enforcement have this information and available to reach out? Shouldn't they have that other drone awareness, the counter drone awareness? And even more importantly, what about drone operators trespassing critical airspace? Over the course of 3 months, this is a report we generated, drone models, serial numbers, and the like, that are actually violating critical airspace corridors that the civil aviation authority is not even aware about because maybe they occur outside the fence line. So again, from a DFR perspective, from awareness of risk in the community, I would propose that these are also uses for that counter UAS, for that awareness of other activity in the vicinity. Certainly threat to critical infrastructure in our communities, like water treatment plants, nuclear plants, power distribution infrastructure. So what are other drones doing in the context of that infrastructure in our communities? Equally, smuggling into local prisons. We see this regularly and on an increasing basis. Again, shouldn't first responders be aware of local suspicious activity in our communities where these prisons and infrastructure are, and where our public that we serve live? And if you had awareness in an automated way of reported drone sightings, but the awareness gave you the behavior of these drones in the vicinity, so a search-like pattern like the one on the left versus maybe some random pattern, maybe a clueless pattern on the right. Shouldn't local law enforcement be aware of the nature of drone activity in the vicinity of their critical facilities? And finally, what about real-time alerts to first responders of other drones? So if you could get an email in real time showing you where these drone incursions are occurring, shouldn't first responders frontline have that awareness rather than maybe a federal agency who has certain jurisdiction but really doesn't deal with response or what happens if there is an accident or an emergency? And then maybe the last example I'd like to highlight is a cross-border smuggling example. So if you happen to live in an area where there are a lot of borders around, we know now that criminals are using drones to actually smuggle weapons and other contraband across our our waterways. There are examples of these like the one shown. The only reason we knew this was starting here was because the pilot on the other side of the border who flew this drone with these guns ran into a tree. And that's sort of where this we first became aware of this. But if you have a border like this one, this is a water border that separates the United States on the left and Canada on the right. And if guns are and other contraband are coming into our community that first responders ultimately need to deal with on the street, why not alert local law enforcement whenever a crossing occurs? So with these scenarios for counter UAS, for understanding where other drones in the vicinity are, not just your DFR, the drone you're going to use tactically, but where other drones are. Now I want to shift to where other aircraft are in the vicinity. So these are your rotary aircraft and your fixed wing and your commercial aircraft. And so where awareness of other aircraft in the vicinity of your operations is needed. And for us, especially with our large territories, being able to fly your DFR beyond visual line of sight from a command center somewhere in your region, we think is going to become a growing need to scale DFR use. So we're in the very early days here, and with first responders really carrying their drones with them presently in their vehicles. And if we're going to affordably scale DFR use across our entire communities, and we do need, as we heard, trained pilots to support that and to help with that culture of that aviation safety culture. They are pilots indeed. Then we could consider trained remote pilots in a command center that will fly the DFRs truly beyond visual line of sight to the scenes where they're needed. So you have your DFRs located on buildings, your drones, and they're dispatched from a command center by a pilot in a chair. And indeed, we're doing this in other applications. And community-based smart surveillance networks, that's the surveillance infrastructure, would be deployed and shared with all authorized safety and security stakeholders at all levels of government, at the local, provincial, and federal level. That common surveillance infrastructure, that decision support infrastructure, should be shared and leveraged, and it can be done so safely, securely, to give you that detect and avoid capability, that awareness of other aircraft coming into piloted aircraft, coming into your airspace that you want to avoid a possible air-to-air collision with. So conceptually, and I only have, I think, 2 or 3 more slides here. Conceptually, if we take a community, this is a community nearby, and it's just a conceptual scene. There's the waterways where pleasure craft and maritime search and rescue incidents occur. There's the land component. There are fire stations and police stations in the vicinity, well represented. So on select fire or police stations, the drones could be launched directly from fixed locations and flown directly to where they're needed, as opposed to in a vehicle as well. Not to avoid the vehicles, but to be able, there will be vehicles with drones, but to be able to access and serve the community more efficiently with the trained pilots and the surveillance infrastructure. That's a sort of modern, beyond visual line of sight use of drones. Presently, this type of use is operational. It's operational where, say, somebody's inspecting long runs of hydroelectric power generation infrastructure or other things, but I believe it has a very relevant DFR use. What you want to be aware of are the other drones in the vicinity that may shape your understanding, your situational awareness. and the counter UAS technologies would give us that. You need to know about other aircraft in the airspace, general aviation aircraft like this one, or commercial aircraft. And with the right radar surveillance and ADS-B infrastructure and the counter UAS infrastructure, you can affordably and easily cover large areas that regional DFRs would provide the frontline response for. Finally, just an illustration of what that beyond visual line of sight looks like. We would be, this is real data, this is a real situation, and the idea is, there's aircraft in the air, there's aircraft that are broadcasting ADS-B, there are aircraft that are not. The ones that are not show 0 feet as an altitude, because altitude is unknown. What you want to do is, if you're operating in an area, a large area where your drones are being dispatched, if you get any intruder aircraft that comes into, sort of a safe airspace, a buffer around where you're operating, you want to be alerted so that you can take a safe posture. You can drop altitude, wait till the aircraft passes by. And aircraft that fly through your operating volume, they won't trip the zone. They'll just fly right through. This particular aircraft was flying at 1,775 feet AGL. So this particular one did not trip the alert. So you continue your operations. But this other aircraft here is just a general aviation aircraft. And it came into the go safe volume, the operational volume, and hence tripped. And the remote pilot would then take appropriate safety actions to ensure no possibility of a mishap. From a technology standpoint, we have integrated all domain awareness solution sets. They're present, they're available, they're mature. Conceptually, they involve sensors, and there are sensors for dark targets, meaning targets that are not transmitting. So aircraft without ADS-B would be a dark target, and radars would be used for those. Drones that are not transmitting would be dark targets, and there are sensors for those. So the counter UAS sensors typically come from this receiving class of sensors, and the beyond visual line of sight sensors typically come from a class of sensors for dark targets. They're all integrated together. They kind of plug and play into wide area networks with sophisticated target information system and data that deliver the decision support tools, the analytics. I've shown you several of examples of those analytics of airspace awareness in the course of this application to DFR use. In summary, or in conclusion, maybe, we see that we believe here, certainly in Canada, the United States, drones as first responders offer law enforcement and fire and EMS personnel. They're incredibly good new tools that offer them the ability to address several frontline and public safety security scenarios that were really difficult to address before, increasing their operational efficiency and serving as a force multiplier, which is something really important in our part of the world, is attracting people to the front line. Smart surveillance networks will provide the required all domain awareness that's needed to support wide-scale DFR use. These capabilities are already here. They're already deployed and used by select stakeholders, not the DFR community itself, to my knowledge. And we would be certainly pleased to answer any questions, and if the opportunity arises, to partner with this community in leveraging our expertise in smart surveillance networks. And I'll stop there.
Oh, thanks, Tim. So we've been having a lot of discussions with Tim and Accipiter, and I think everybody sees the advantages of some of these sensor systems. We all know that if you're just flying around a house, a visual observer is pretty effective, but when it becomes more than that, when you're flying more complicated missions, further, higher, the benefits of this kind of sensor technology, the ability to incorporate the analytics and the automation that it does is going to be far superior to any human. So